too.
Audrey, I think it's high time we had a little sip of tea
I
to
think so too.
give us some quick energy here.
There's nothing like green tea, you know.
Oh, I know, but there is controversy about green tea. Some people say black tea's better, but never mind. We don't want to be concerned about that now.
I'm reminded about the time we went to the Siamese ball.
Oh,
with
yes.
we remember we were wearing our
Pink chiffon ball
dresses.
gowns.
yeah, and these are the thing is, you remember you had fallen down, and you'd hit your forehead here.
That's right.
Yeah, you still have a scar.
I still have a scar here, yeah.
Yeah, and on the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were supposed to go to the Siamese ball the next night, and you refused to go.
I wouldn't go because I
Because-
didn't want to have a bandage on my head.
Yeah, it was
So
the
I-
Siamese ambassador.
Yeah.
These balls, you know, it would kill me, or it made me sort of sick every time I went to these, because we'd come off the streets where all these beggars were around.
I know
and
what you
all-
mean, yeah.
And then at night, everybody would dress up as if,
As if there
nothing was
was
happening in
nothing
China,
sad
and go
going
to
on.
these
yeah.
go to these diplomatic receptions and balls. But this night, you didn't want to come
And,
because you had a bandage.
and you know what I made you do?
Yes, I remember very
I'm
well.
sorry, I'm sorry.
I should-
All right, folks, stand by. Quiet on the set. I'll count you down. 5, 4, 3. I'll count you down again, okay? Stand by. 5, 4, 3.
Hey, Audrey, I think it's high time we had another cup of tea. Don't you?
Thank you. I love this
We
green
need,
tea.
we need something
You
to
make
give
the
us.
best tea, ma'am.
I think so too, but you know the Chinese taught me how, so. Of course, I've become a master at it, just like I can cook rice, like the Chinese cook rice.
Well, I can eat it like the Chinese eat it. I can drink tea like the Chinese drink tea.
Oh, I'm glad.
Well, anyway, we were talking earlier, you know,
Yeah.
about our time at the Siamese ball and how different it was from the streets. How the streets
Yes.
of Nanking were so covered with these poor refugees that came down from the north, and poverty all over the streets. But yet, in the government circles, among the nationalists and the diplomats, everything was going on as if
Nothing was
you
going
know, they
happening.
were fiddling while Rome was burning.
That's exactly right.
And we were into it just like everybody else, because we would come home from school and work, and we'd get all dressed up and go to but the one night, the Siamese ball,
I remember very
they
well.
invited
Yeah.
us, and I wanted very much to go, but you'd fallen down and hurt your head.
And I had
you had a cut. You had a cut. It's still there. You
Yeah.
can still see your cut, actually.
And I had a
It's-
big-
It's over here.
No, it's here.
Oh, well.
You can still see it. But I had a big bandage on it, and I wasn't about to go to the Siamese
Yeah,
ball
right.
with a
Did
big
you have another
bandage.
bandage over here? You had another
That's
one.
where you put yours. You put yours so that we
No, I
could
put
both
mine
have
here, too.
bandages. And then we,
The only way I would go, the only way I could get you to go was put a bandage on myself.
that's right.
So.
And then we told a story. Remember the story we
Well,
told?
that's when Lipkovsky asked me to dance.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, we came with our pink chiffon dresses and bandages on our faces late. And then these two diplomats, the French diplomat, Jean de Lipkovsky, third secretary of the French
French.
embassy, and then the Italian count, two counts. And they came rushing over to see us and welcome us. And they had been waiting for us. And then remember we were dancing, and Lipkovsky looked down through my bandage. First they said, you know, what happened to you? What did we say?
We had been in an automobile
Oh, you're in a
accident.
car accident.
And that Lao Drew had to stop very quickly, and we banged into the back of the front seat. But then the next day,
No, well, wait till I tell you how it was discovered.
Oh, yes.
I'm dancing with Lipkovsky,
yeah,
and he looks down through my bandage, and he sees nothing there. You could see right through the bandage that was coming out like this. And he said, Audrey, I don't believe you were in a car accident. What's all this? Why are you maybe coming with bandages? So I confessed to him. I said,
Told
well,
him
you know,
it
we were in a
was-
car accident. It hurt Mamie, but didn't hurt me, but I put on a bandage anyway. So then we had a good time, and we went home.
And the next day, Daddy went to the barber shop and met the Egyptian ambassador. And the Egyptian ambassador said, Mr. Ronning, I'm terribly sorry about your daughters in the automobile accident. And Daddy said, what? What automobile accident? I didn't know they were in an automobile accident.
So then he rushes home and tells us, when were you in the accident? And by that time, my bandages were off, just yours. So we had to confess.
The truth won't come out.
The truth will come out. But, you know, what made me think of it was the difference.
Yes, of
between
course.
The streets
The
of Nanking
contrast.
and the war, the civil war going on, the worst. And here we are all acting as if there's nothing happening.
Yeah,
You know,
it's a little,
Well, I remember driving home with a nationalist official in a big limo, and driving home through the streets and looking, and I said to him, look, these people, what a pity. I said, for me as a foreigner, it's just terrible, but for you as a Chinese, it must be even worse. And he looked at me and he sat up straight and he said, I don't consider these people.
yeah, yeah.
And then I knew that the revolution was inevitable. I knew the communists would win.
Oh,
Because
sure.
of the nationalist attitudes, of the superior attitudes that they had. You know, can you imagine saying that? We don't consider them people?
Well, you see, the upper class didn't consider
No,
any of the
yeah.
poor class as people. They were just human beings running around scratching for a living, eating
Yeah,
out of,
without a care, without a care.
yeah.
Well, you know, yesterday we started talking a little bit about the babies that were thrown over the wall.
Frozen in
This-
Nanking, yeah.
Well, they were also thrown over the wall and just left there to die,
Yeah.
frozen or not. After a while, they froze because it was in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But then, oh, hi, Les. Would you like to come and sit down?
Hi, Mom.
Come on in.
Sure.
Hi, Leslie.
I wanted to tell you about your great-grandmother.
Oh, yes?
You know, Hannah Roram. You know, she's a wonderful story, man.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know much
this
about
is-
it, so I'll listen too while you tell Leslie.
Well, you know, she came out as a missionary from Iowa. And I'll just tell you briefly how she met your great-grandfather, Oliver.
Sure.
Oh, I think
In
that's a
small
darn
town,
story.
Radcliffe, Iowa. And he came with his sister Tia to raise funds for the China mission. He came for over 5 years and become an American citizen.
Oh, yes.
So then he went to the church to raise money, and Hannah was the organist. And she got so intrigued by this tall, handsome man walking back and forth at the stage, pleading to raise money for China, for the mission. And of course, in those days, the attitude towards missionaries was much different. You know, they thought this was the highest calling they could have, was to be a missionary and spread the good word. So Hannah she was only 18. She got so intrigued by this that she decided to join the mission, to go to China with them. So she wrote to the mission board, and they turned her down. So she was determined, and she said, well, I'll raise my own money. So she went out with her brother. She had like
Fortunately, she had a couple of wealthy
Beautiful.
brothers.
yeah, but she also had, you remember Uncle Tom? You know, she had very handsome brothers, and she went all around the state and played the piano and sang. And then the big brothers passed the hat, and they glare at everybody until everybody put enough money in. And she raised her own money. Can you imagine? Raising her own money to go to China. She was so determined to do that.
Because she was madly in love with Grandpa
Well, she didn't admit that.
at that
At
time.
the time, because her they tell a story coming home from the church. The mother said, you know, Oliver isn't married, and my grandmother said, well, I can see why, he's homely as a mud fence. And of course, that was just to, the lady protests too much, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So she followed him to China. They went on the Empress of China, half steam, half sail. The biggest ship in the world at that time, the Empress of China. And they fell in love on the way, obviously, because by the time they got to Shanghai, which was, you know, Grandpa has written about this in his book. They got to Shanghai, and the cultural shock that you think we had in '46
It was much
was
worse.
nothing compared to what they had in 1891.
Yeah.
And that was when Shanghai was still the concessions, foreign concessions, and there were foreign warships from 5 nations all over the Shanghai harbor. The China, this is the Qing dynasty, remember? Just at the end of the Qing dynasty,
Yeah.
Empress Dowager was still there. Anyway, they got on this boat and they went up to Hankow on a small boat up the Yangtze. By the time they got to Hankow, they got married. They had fallen in love, they got married.
They got married on the boat.
No, they got married in.
I thought they got married on the boat.
No,
too.
they got married in the British embassy, the British concession in the mission there
In Hankow.
in Hankow in December 31st, 1891. I remember the date because it was Christmas Eve, not the 31st, the 25th. Yeah, it was Christmas Eve, 24th.
24th.
Yeah. So anyway, they then went up to Fancheng in the center of a place called Shangfan. Today it's called Shangfan. And they established a mission there. And Grandpa built a church and a house. They're still there.
I've seen them.
And they founded schools. But one day, I started telling you this because of the babies that we saw in 1946 that had been thrown over the wall. Well, infanticide was something they did in China, even, you know, much more so in the old days.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And they started, there was Grandma and, well, Hannah, I should call her because she wasn't my grandmother then. Hannah and Tia found these babies and they started an orphanage and a school, and it's still there today. That school that they founded and started the girls' school with these children they had from their own orphanage were their
So
first
they went
students.
out and rescued the babies, or
Yeah.
people gave them the babies?
No, they didn't give them the babies.
They would never
they-
do that. They
they-
would never
Oh,
drop
no,
the babies
but,
off?
you know, you're right. After a while, when they heard that there were women missionaries that were taking care of the babies, some of the women, rather than kill the baby by throwing, they put it on her doorstep. And they would open the gate to the mission in the mornings and they'd find babies put in front of the mission. If they were still alive, they'd take them.
Mamie, you were there in China as a baby. And what year did you return to China?
Well, we returned in 1946. I left in 1927 as an infant, not remembering anything. But it just seems like my whole childhood was taken up with China. China, China, China.
Mine too,
You know.
even though I wasn't there.
Yeah, we had Grandpa's attic to go up into, and so we felt that we had lived in China before. But even then, there was a terrific cultural shock. Even though all our lives we learned all Chinese songs and played Chinese games, and Mom and Dad often talked about how they escaped and what we went through in order to get out of China in 1927. And I guess we got out by hook or by crook. We're lucky to be here, and so are you, because if we'd gotten killed, you wouldn't be here either.
Were you scared when you were there? Were you scared that you were going to get caught in a war?
No,
You mean in '46?
Yes,
Yeah.
when you were there.
I wasn't.
Was there,
I didn't have any sense of fear at all, because when I'm with my family, I feel so snug and secure that nothing can happen.
Also, at that age, you don't have a real sense of consequence. We were very much aware that
Of
there
what
was a
was
civil
going
war
on.
going on. And I was afraid, a little bit afraid, I have to tell you. Not for me so much, but for Dad. You know.
Yeah, well, because he was sick too, towards the end.
Yeah, and for Top. You
Yeah.
know, Top went behind the lines. He was behind the communist lines and in enemy territory covering the war. So I had a few qualms. Yeah.
so both of you met your husbands there.
Right.
You met David, and you met
Your
Todd,
daddy.
my dad, and my uncle.
And I
What was
first,
David doing?
he was with the Naval Advisory Group. And when I first laid eyes on David, he was across the dance floor with his back, you know, I just saw his back. And I said to the guy I was with, I said, see that guy over there? He's the man I'm going to marry. And I hadn't even seen the front of his face yet.
That's fate.
I know. And then when he turned around, he was so handsome I nearly collapsed.
And so did he, when he saw Mimi.
Yeah,
It
same
was a
thing happened to
mutual
him.
feeling. It was a mutual feeling.
But I can't remember exactly how you met Top. It seems that we were at the International Club.
No, Mimi, we were at the Officers Club.
Yeah.
The American Officers Club. We had been invited by Colonel Beebe, the American military attaché, for a dinner party, dinner dance. They had an orchestra playing, and you were sitting
And I-
beside Top,
Yeah.
and I was sitting opposite you. And Top turned to me and he gives me this big smile, and I think, wow. Then he turns to Mamie and asks her to dance. And I thought, uh-oh, there goes another one. And so they're dancing, and then
But I
then
mean,
he asked me to dance.
and that was
And
it.
we've been dancing ever since.
But I feel so stupid now because one of the questions Top asked, just to get acquainted, he said, Mamie, what do you miss most about being in China? And I said, I think chocolate milkshakes.
Well, that's true. You know, we did miss our ice cream and chocolate milk.
And then you did not return to China for many, many years until that trip in which Richard and I
That's right,
went
1975.
with you and my mother in 1974.
And Grandpa.
Or 75. 75,
Mm-hmm.
and we were some of the first foreigners, Americans, to be allowed back in.
Well,
Well,
with
you were
Grandpa,
as
we went
Canadians
Grandpa.
before.
I went in
Back
71,
to
60.
Fancheng, where I saw Hannah's grave. We all
Right.
saw Hannah's grave, and we saw
We
the
have a
church
picture of
where
that.
she was, and it had become a school for children, right?
No, it hadn't become a
It had-
school.
it
It
was-
always
it
was
was
a
a
school.
school. It
It
was a
always
school.
was a school. And she was buried in the school churchyard because, I mean, it was a schoolyard and a church, and then they had buried some of the missionaries there, including Grandma's
Tia.
sister, Tia. And I remember when we were there, I said to the headmaster at the school, you know, why do you have the tomb of a Christian missionary in a communist schoolyard? And he thought for a little while and he said, well, she was a revolutionary too. Which I thought was a very good
Very
answer.
good, yeah.
Because she was a revolutionary in the sense that, you know, they had bound feet at that time, and she wanted to unbind the feet of all the girls. And in order to get in the school, there was only one criterion, and that's to unbind the feet.
Audrey, have you
She
seen,
was an early women's liberator. She liberated some
Definitely.
of the early women in China.
like
Definitely.
the end of this Sixth Happiness? Have you seen that movie with
No.
Ingrid Bergman? It's a story about a missionary,
yeah.
and it's very similar to Hannah's story.
Yeah, probably based on her story.
Well, no, but this is a true story too,
Yeah,
of a missionary
Yeah.
from England
oh yeah.
who wasn't accepted and fought her own way to China because she was just so determined to
Oh,
get out
really?
there. And she helped unbind the feet.
And how did you feel going back? You hadn't been back. Were you surprised at the changes in China? Did it feel different? Did it feel
When
the
I went
same?
back from when?
From 46 and you returned
Went back
in
to 75.
75.
Oh, yes.
What
Oh,
were your
48,
reactions?
It was unbelievable. The conditions for the average Chinese person, the conditions were so improved. There was no poverty in the streets that we could see, or that I saw. Did you?
Very little.
Yeah, compared to.
No beggars.
Yeah, no, you could walk down the street and have a fistful of money, and you wouldn't be throwing it on the floor on the ground. like we used to do when
And they had,
we walked down the streets in Nanking.
we had to have money to just get by. It was like running the gauntlet, of beggars.
This was before.
In 46,
Yeah,
and it's
but-
48 to 48. But was it 75 when
I think
you
so,
first
yeah.
went back with me?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, it changed.
You mean in order to
The-
walk down the street in 46, in order
47.
to get by the beggars and to make them leave you alone, you had to give them some money?
We just,
Otherwise, they would be trailing you the whole time?
Yeah, and touching you.
begging for
And
money. So
you-
you just take the money, what you had, and you threw it on the floor.
Sores on there.
And that
Faces.
one lady in the arcade, do you remember her? She had sores right from straight down to here. And I couldn't stand to look at the poor thing because there was nothing I could do for her.
Yeah. And also, it was very bad to give them money. Even we didn't realize that the more money you gave them, the more
The more they
beggars you
wanted,
had
yeah, following you.
trailing you. So we had to escape.
But
and,
in 75, the conditions for most people
They all had
were much, much better.
much better. They all had houses. The boat people had houses on shore. And first of all, they felt unworthy of the houses. But after a couple of years, they said, "This house isn't big enough for me." So the more you get, the more you want.
yeah.
So that's what happens to the Chinese, or what happens to everybody. You're never satisfied. You always want more.
Yeah.
But yes, it was a great surprise, but a nice surprise. I haven't been to China since 1984, so I don't know if I'd like all the changes now.
You see, in 1984, we took Grandpa back, Chester Ronning, to celebrate his 90th birthday. All he wanted, he had 3 wishes before he died. That he told Mamie and I in camera, saying, I want to visit. I want to go and pay my respects to my mother's grave before I die, which is very Chinese, of course. And I want to go to the end of the Great Wall. He had been
We went there.
In the 20s. They have pictures of them riding on the Great Wall in donkeys.
On little mules, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they were little mules, but I thought they were donkeys. We will never agree, was it a mule or a donkey?
What is the difference?
Oh, it's a big difference.
Really?
A mule is a cross between a donkey and a horse.
Yeah.
A donkey is a donkey and a horse is a horse.
So
Yeah, is there
why
any-
did he want to go to the end of the Great Wall? What is
Because
the end of the Great Wall?
The end of the Great Wall is, it's about 1,500 miles long, and it goes
Right.
right into the interior. We went to the end of the Great Wall with him, where they had where we climbed the stairs of the Pavilion of Enlightenment.
What
It's,
province?
I think it's in Gansu. I'm not exactly sure.
I think it is
where
too,
it
yeah.
is. But it's way out there in the middle of the desert. We had to go through Turkestan, what used to be Turkestan area, in the Gobi Desert, in order to get to
Now,
Nulwan Temple Caves.
Yeah, right. Oh, yes.
And we drove through a lot of the ancient cities there, the cities that had been covered by sand. And they were uncovered in the 1920s by some of the archaeologists that went there. But this was before, this was 84, and we were allowed to dig. Dug
we
up
had
and
fun digging in all
We
those-
found an old shoe, and we found,
And little bits of porcelain.
and then Alton our brother Alton, your uncle, he felt guilty about finding all this stuff, so he took some Canadian coins out and buried the Canadian coins. Now people will come out, the archaeologists, and they'll find these Canadian coins, and they'll wonder how the Canadians got there. There'll be a whole new theory, there were Canadians here in 1300. But we did find one shard. It was absolutely beautiful. I was so excited. And then we went to, I asked one of our Chinese guides about this. I said, look at this great treasure. And he said, he said the Japanese were here making a documentary last week, and this was one of their props. So there goes my great treasure. Anyway, that was a great trip. We did take Grandpa to all the places. We granted him his 3 wishes. All of us, all of his children, brought him back to China, and we took him back.
For his 90th birthday,
yeah.
which was, he was only 89, but we took him back to Fengcheng, and then he celebrated his 90th, real 90th birthday in China. So he had 2 celebrations only.
Yeah,
Not
like
6.
Richard. But we, on the night of his birthday, the mayor of the town came and all the officials, and we all celebrated Grandpa's birthday, and they gave him longevity noodles
Yeah.
and the great feast, and he played the finger game with them all the time. Chiga chow ba pi ma ya puso.
I've forgotten.
You remember? It's
Yeah.
a finger game. It's a drinking game,
Yeah.
and he goes yiga lao cheese chi. It starts out. I was an old man of 77, and then Daddy goes on and plays the finger game, and everybody thought that was so great. But the greatest thing about that trip was when we got back to Peking. It was called then, and there was a knock on the door. We had been on television because Huang Hua, the foreign minister,
Oh,
gave us
yes.
a banquet. I mean, we ate so many banquets there we could hardly stand up, you know. And there was a knock on the door, in our hotel door, and it was a little old brown man with his son. And he went up, he looked at Dad, and Dad looked at him. And Dad said, "Oh, it can't be. Li. Xiao Li." And he said, "Yes," and they started to cry, and they hugged each other.
They'd gone to school together.
They were chums. They hadn't seen each other for 80 years.
But Charlie, he recognized Daddy on television
Yeah.
before he came to the hotel.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, at that time, Daddy was losing, Chester was losing some command of his English, because remember, Chinese was his first language, and then Norwegian his second language, and English was his third language, although he spoke it beautifully. with
He had
an
no accent in either.
But he was beginning to lose some of the words in English. But when he started talking to Lao Li, his Chinese was absolutely fluent. That's what sort of struck me, that his Chinese was still fluent when he was beginning to forget his words, some of the words in English. And they sat there and talked like a couple of kids.
I know, it was so...
They talked about the frogs they used to catch in the rice paddies. They call them chicken, what do they call them?
I've forgotten.
Paddy frogs.
Patty frogs.
Paddy chickens.
Patty
Paddy
chickens, that was it,
chickens,
yeah.
And how they played games when they were kids. I mean, that was really a wonderful, touching reunion, you know. So anyway, then he celebrated his birthday. We went back to Canada. And not long after that, he died. But we like to think he died a happy man.
Oh, he did.
Because he had fulfilled the 3 wishes that we, Mamie and I, and Sylvia and Alton and Mamie and Shireen and Harmon, we all took him back. So he's with his children and granted the 3 wishes, then he went back and he was.
Died on
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, 1984.
Now listen to this, very interesting. He was born in December 31st, 1894. He died December 31st, 1984. You see, I'm sorry, the
December
13th, wait a
13th.
minute. He was born December 13th, 1894. He died December 31st, 1984.
So
All of the
Oh, that's
numbers
reversed.
are reversed, which I took to be the completion of the
Cycle.
of life.
Yeah.
The wheel of life was completely finished. You know, we felt very happy in the Chinese way that he had been.
He'd
So
done his
that's-
duty here on Earth.
Yeah, yeah. So he never got over the death of his mother, though. At the age of 36.
And he was only
She died.
14. wasn't
Yeah, he was only 12 or 13 because
he? Yeah, well, he was
And-
14 when he came to the States.
she died in 1907
Mm-hmm.
and leaving 7 children. So he says, you know, he thinks she martyred herself, that she was a martyr to the Chinese cause. And the education, see, the most important thing for the Ronings has not been to Christianize the Chinese, but to educate them. Education has been the top priority for both your great-grandfather and my grandfather, and your grandfather. Oliver Ronning and Chester Ronning.
Chester Ronning became a teacher before he became a diplomat.
Right.
Yes, he was taught in the same school that his parents founded. In the-
And you know, Leslie, the church that our grandfather built, when the communists took over, they took over the church, and guess what they did with that church? They built it into a carpenter shop. Now, do you get
well, let me tell
this,
you.
what that means? The
Okay.
carpenter shop, who was a carpenter?
Well,
Jesus.
right.
But you see, this was something that Dad said. Remember, maybe they wouldn't take us to the church. When we
At first, I
They didn't
know.
want to take, they said, there is no church. And we had been there before. Just the year before, I'd been there with
Yeah.
Dad, and I said, of course there's a church. Dad said, you know, he had this cane, silver cane, and he would say forward march. Kaibutso, Kaibutso, he'd take his cane. And there were these communist officials all over. They said, there is no church, you can't go to the church. Dad picks up his cane and said, Kaibutso, looked at us. And he said, I'll show you where the church is. And we marched off, and there behind a wall, we found the church. But the reason they didn't want to show it to us because it was full of lumber. And then and there were some other people that came too, remember? Some people that had known the family. And they wanted to see Dad, and they said, we'll take you there, we'll take you there. And then they were so embarrassed because it was a carpenter's shop
Yeah.
that they and Dad said to them, don't be embarrassed. He said, remember, Jesus Christ was a carpenter's son. And that made it all okay. You know, he was so diplomatic, he didn't want to hurt their
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
They felt bad enough.
Yeah, I like that story.
Yeah. And we went all through the house. The old house was still there. Sylvia recognized every room.
Yeah, she did.
Sylvia, that's when Sylvia started taking us around. This was here, and this was here, and this was here, and this was here. And you know, the house is still there. And I think we should go there again.
I'd love to see it, yeah.
Because now, you know, the attitude towards religion has changed, and the churches are open. There are lots of churches now in China. And you go to China today, and you wouldn't, it's just like New York. It's just like Manhattan.
I know.
All over the place.
Well, I mean, I haven't been there recently. But from what I've seen on
Is that good
TV,
or bad?
That's good. It's good for
in
China.
a sense,
It's-
I'm not so sure.
Well, you know, those of us that photographers like me, I hate to see I want to see the
The old
water
China,
buffalo and the
Yeah.
fields and the eternal China.
that's what I like too.
But of course, the price of progress is
Is-
that they're just like us.
Well, that's the
And
modern world,
it's
and
the
we're
modern
all the
world.
same.
But
The
progress is-
modern world is becoming more uniformed, and that's
Yeah.
part of equality.
Exactly. Yeah.
Progress is not always good.
Well, the biggest problem in China today is pollution. And when we went,
What's our biggest problem? Pollution.
well, we've got a handle on it a little more than the Chinese. Yeah, we were just there in Beijing last month, and I was shocked at the pollution. But they're doing something about it because of the Olympics. Olympics is coming. They're cleaning it all up, which is very good. But I remember, you know, when we went there in '71, we were invited twice to the Great Hall of People to have dinner with Zhou Enlai, who was then the premier. And he sat, Dad and Zhou Enlai talked about China and the development. I remember Dad said to Zhou Enlai, Dad said, you know, I can come now because I've retired. He couldn't come to China before because he was working for the Canadian government. He was a
External
diplomat.
affairs, yeah.
And Canada didn't recognize China. As soon as he retired as the High Commissioner to India, then he accepted the invitation. And Sylvia and I went with him.
But also because he was very influential in getting Canada to recognize mainland China.
Oh, yeah. But that,
So that's
that was
why-
later. In '71, they hadn't
They
recognized.
hadn't recognized, no, yes, they had.
No, not
No?
'71.